On the 24th of December 1913, in the town of Calumet in Michigan, employees of a copper mining company were enjoying a Christmas party at a community hall. At some point in proceedings, a loud cry was heard. Fire! The crowd rushed to escape down a single narrow staircase, but there simply wasn't room for everyone to evacuate at once. In the panic and confusion which followed, many of those in attendance would lose their lives. 1913 was a tense year for the residents of Calumet. Many of them worked for the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company, a huge and very successful firm which specialised in the extraction and processing of copper ore from mines in the copper-rich Upper Peninsula of Michigan. In some ways, the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company was a very good employer. It provided housing and other facilities for its workers, including libraries, bathhouses, and leisure facilities such as bowling alleys and clubhouses. It started a voluntary fund to take care of ill and injured workers, and matched employee contributions to this fund, something that was almost unheard of at the time. Not only this, but it poured money into the local economy, funding the construction of schools and churches for the benefit of the entire community. This was all a good investment for the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company. By taking care of their workers to a standard much higher than any other mining company, they easily attracted the best workers, and these workers remained incredibly loyal to the company. At the same time though, not everyone was happy with this arrangement. By providing everything for its employees, the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company exercised a massive degree of control over their lives. Since the mining company controlled the whole town, bad behaviour such as drunkenness or brawling could cost a worker their job, even when it happened outside of working hours. Losing their job would also mean losing their home, their church, and their children's schooling. Not an ideal arrangement. Compounding this was the fact that the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company, like every other mining company, was resistant to the idea of a minimum wage and, by 1913, had begun pushing some of its workers to work alone in dangerous conditions. Attitudes to the Calumet and Heckler Mining Company among the workers were mixed. And so, when the Western Federation of Miners, a union of mine workers, called for a strike in July of 1913, it divided the town. Some workers were strongly in favour of a strike, while others very much wanted to go back to work. After some time, the National Guard was brought in. Although the strike was allowed to continue, those who wanted to work were able to do so under their protection. It wasn't an ideal solution, and tensions were certainly high, but it allowed the mine to continue functioning. For 5 long months, the strike dragged on. By the time Christmas rolled around, many of the strikers were hurting. With no money coming in, they couldn't afford to buy their children Christmas presents, and were badly in need of a morale boost. To provide just that, the Western Federation of Miners booked out the Italian Hall in Calumet, and laid on an evening of food, drink and entertainment for the striking workers. The Italian Hall was a sort of community centre for the town of Calumet. This 2-storey structure had a space for shops and a saloon on the ground floor, and a large meeting hall on the top floor. It was in this large hall that the party would take place, with more than 600 people, many of them children, congregating there over the course of the evening. Even to this day, nobody knows who shouted the word fire. But at some point in the night, this cry was heard, loud and clear. It cut through the music and the chatter, causing an instant panic. And no wonder. The Iroquois Theatre fire and its horrifying death toll was still fresh in the memories of many of those in attendance. Fearful of a similar tragedy, guests surged towards the only easily accessible exit, a narrow staircase that led down to the street outside. Had they been more familiar with the building, they might have escaped using another route. There was an additional fire exit, but it wasn't clearly signposted, and had to be accessed through the kitchen. Several of the windows were also fitted with ladders to allow people to escape in an emergency, but these were of little use. The panicking partygoers simply didn't know the ladders were there. Some people survived by jumping from the windows, or by staying put in the hall despite the panic surrounding them. These were the lucky ones. Those who tried to escape via the main staircase were caught almost instantly in a deadly human crush. Passers-by outside were drawn by the shouts and screams of those trapped on the staircase, and arrived to find it jammed floor to ceiling with bodies, many of them children. Though they pulled out anyone they could, many were already beyond rescue. By the time it was realised that there was no fire, dozens had been crushed and suffocated. The panic subsided in mere minutes, but the damage was already done. The dead were dragged out of the stairwell one by one and taken to the town hall, where they were lined up for identification. Every physician in town was brought to the scene to do the best they could to help the injured. In total, 73 people lost their lives, 59 of them children. It was one of the worst mining-related disasters ever to hit the region, and it happened above ground, mainly affecting the wives and children of mine workers. In the aftermath of the disaster, tensions were extremely high. The question arose, who was to blame? For days and weeks, rumours circulated. Some people thought that a drunk from the saloon below the hall was to blame, while many others were adamant that they had seen the man who shouted fire, and that he had been wearing an anti-union pin. Suspicion fell on the Calumet and Hecla Mining Company itself, but also on a separate anti-union body known as the Citizens Alliance. So great was the ill feeling towards the Citizens Alliance, in fact, that the relatives of victims turned down $25,000 in aid raised by the organisation, and the leader of the Western Federation of Miners openly accused them of being responsible for causing the disaster. In a development that highlights just how inflamed tensions were, this resulted in members of the Citizens Alliance shooting the leader of the Western Federation of Miners and forcing him, wounded and bleeding, onto a train out of the state. Elsewhere, there was an ongoing furore, as newspapers printed headlines calling the deaths murders. Accusations flew back and forth, with different papers printing wildly different stories and differing accounts of events. Ultimately, it was never found out who was responsible for that first deadly shout of fire. While most of those involved were convinced that it was related to the strike, there is also a small possibility that it was a genuine error, that someone at the gathering really thought there was a fire. That aside, it may have been intended as an ill-advised joke, or a way of causing some minor disruption. The reason behind this senseless tragedy has been lost to history. In the shadow of such an enormous disaster, the strike didn't last much longer. In April of 1914 it came to an end, and the striking workers returned to the mine, with many of them having to tear up their Western Federation of Miners membership cards in front of mine bosses before they were allowed to do so. Although the strike didn't succeed, it also wasn't a complete loss, as it did pave the way for more successful unionisation in the future. The Italian Hall remained standing, although it fell into disrepair after some time and was eventually demolished in 1984. One feature was retained, the doorway through which so many had tried to escape. It now forms part of a small park, a quiet and contemplative place which houses a memorial marked with the names of those who died. The Italian Hall disaster is one of several incidents which illustrate a principle that is commonly used even today. The idea that free speech does not extend to shouting fire in a crowded theatre. Whatever the intention of the person who did just this in December of 1913, the Italian Hall disaster is a vivid illustration of just how dangerous a panic can be.